Touchdown, Florida State. Hey, Seminole fans, it's time for another edition of the Osceola Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Osceola Podcast. My name is Pat Burnham. I'm a writer for the Osceola and the host of today's show. I'm joined today by Jerry Cutts, the owner and publisher of the Osceola. Welcome, Jerry.
Hey, Pat. Good to be here.
We're also have Bob Ferrante with us, the managing editor of the Osceola. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, Pat. How are you?
I'm doing great. And Charles Fishbein, the Osceola's recruiting analyst. Fish, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. A little cooped up, but all ready to go.
Yeah, I think we're all a little bit cooped up. And as Fish alluded to, this is not a normal podcast for the Osceola. With all that is going on in the world in the United States with the outbreak of COVID-19, the coronavirus, we're going to start today's show with some updated information on how COVID-19 has impacted not only FSU athletics, but athletics across the country. And particularly as to some news that broke today from Florida State. And Jerry, I want to throw it right to you on that.
Yeah, it was a very interesting day in the news world today with the Florida State announcements. While we anticipated them, the cancellation of all spring sports, the cancellation of the spring game and concert, and the cancellation of the spring booster tour, they weren't unexpected. I think we all could see the handwriting on the wall with this a while back. We'll get into each of those individually. Pat, you can ask me about each one of them. But let me just say at the top of the show that I was talking with an athletic administrator today, Jim Curry, who is a compliance guy, and he knows all the rules. That he's been in all the meetings on what they can and can't do, and he shed some light on that with me, which we can talk about as well. But the point to lead this off is that in times like this, as a news reporter, as a guy that has done this for a very long time, it's kind of exciting. It's kind of, while I hate it, it certainly isn't mundane. And that's the point Jim and I were talking about is it's part of this profession. It's part of this career. And you certainly get up and go to work today with a lot more energy than some other days. So it's very interesting news, and it'll continue to unfold in the coming weeks. So let me toss it back to you, Pat, about each one of those individually.
Yeah, well, you mentioned obviously the big ticket item for Florida State fans was the announcement that the spring game was being closed, and that has some impact not only on the fans, but also with the cancellation of spring practice has some significant consequences on Coach Mike Norvell installing his offensive and defensive systems and building his culture. So certainly just talk about the impact of FSU not having a spring game from the business side of things, Jared.
Well, it's let me just say this. The athletic department, David Coburn, the Seminole Booster office, Andy Miller, they're devastated that this had to happen. But there's no choice. Whether you look at federal direction from the White House or you look at state from Ron DeSantis, or you look at your conference office, all indications were that, public health and safety comes first. And so, emotionally, it's devastating and it's draining on the administration. I've been in their shoes. These players and these coaches on a very personal basis, and it breaks your heart to see that they can't compete. So the first thing to say is it's emotionally devastating. I think from the second standpoint, you feel when I was in the booster office, I felt for the fans. I mean, they really look forward to this. This is their escape from reality, and it's their hobby, and it's their passion. And now all of a sudden, well, it's not just the game. I mean, we all love the game, but it's also being able to come to Tallahassee in the spring and have a tailgate party with your friends, fraternity reunions, and it's a lot of activities besides the game on a spring weekend. So, and then you think about canceling the game and what it does to the hotels and restaurants and the businesses in our community. And It's very, very difficult economically on everybody, but it had to be done. So I thought it was smart to go ahead and announce it now rather than later.
Now, you also mentioned that the booster tour for Coach Norvell and various other coaches has been canceled for the spring. How does explain to us how that impacts not only Booster Club memberships, but also how Florida State goes about raising money for not only the football program, but all athletic programs?
Well, that's a great question. Coach Bowden started that tour back when he came from West Virginia, and he and Charlie Barnes would load up in the van and they'd drive around the state. I had the privilege to ride with them many times. And then after, Coach Bowden, we did it with all the other coaches. What it does, back before the internet and before there was any other way to communicate, each one of those tour stops, I like to think of it as a Seminole tribe. And, that's where they live. And we'd come down there and it would help them keep the fire burning between football season past and football season coming. And it was exciting. And we were able to pitch, the coach would get up there and get them all jacked up. And then, we'd pitch them to buy season tickets or renew season tickets and to give money to the boosters. And at one time, it was a reward for the volunteer campaign. Our volunteers worked very hard to raise money, and the ones that were successful would get the tour. So the tour was a reward to the cities that had, sold the most tickets and raised the most money. And so that tour is vital to season ticket sales and fundraising, maybe more so before than now, but it's still a very important part of your fundraising effort. To cancel the tour had to be one of the harder decisions Andy Miller's ever made. Partly because we love doing it, and partly because we know how much it means to people out there in the community who they don't get to see Florida State every day like you do in Tallahassee. So, that's almost Florida State Day in Tampa and Florida State Day in Orlando. So these are tough decisions, but guess what? We're not the only people making very difficult decisions today. There's businesses all across the country that are having to sacrifice short term for what we hope, more than hope, because hope isn't a strategy. What we plan to be a quicker flattening of the curve, as they say, and that we can get back to normalcy quicker. So let me say this too, Pat. I don't mean to be too long on this, but the tour is complex because you're bringing thousands of people into gatherings, which, we're not allowed to. You can't gather right now. You can't have a gathering with hundreds of people at it, first of all. Nor would you want to put your donors at risk. And then the travel aspects of trying to book hotel rooms and meeting rooms, all the logistics that are involved in this. I mean, it was not possible. And I'm sure Andy and his staff made a lot of phone calls, and there just was no way to do it.
Yeah, well, the thing that I hate, other than the reality that we've all having to embrace now, is the fact that there was such positive energy around the program. I think the tour would have been ultra successful had they been able to go ahead and move forward with it. But as you said, this is a reality that people are facing in all walks of life, just not FSU athletics, and certainly not just in Tallahassee. Bob, I just kind of want to throw it to you for a second before we get started on the cancellation of spring sports. The last time we spoke, Florida State was getting ready to head into the ACC men's basketball tournament, which was canceled minutes before FSU took the floor for its first game, and they were promptly announced as the ACC champions. Just want to ask you, as someone who's covered Florida State basketball, both the men's and women's teams, very closely this year, your thoughts on the basketball team and how disappointed you were to see that come to an unexpected end.
It was surreal. I don't think the players really had a firm grip on what was going on, and I think Commissioner John Swaffer was trying to explain it and go through some of the details of how quickly things moved, because really that day I think he went on the ACC network in the morning and said the games are on. He did a press conference which was delayed and said the games were on, and then about 15, 20 minutes before they decided it was in the best interest not to play the games. I think a lot of that was a result of what happened in the NBA with the Utah Jazz having 2 players testing positive for COVID-19, the coronavirus. In the end, it's disappointing, but I guess I do choose to look on the bright side with Florida State basketball. They gave us plenty of really incredible moments this year, not just Trent Forrest and not just Patrick Williams and all the guys, but to go 16-0 at home, you never saw a loss. You never saw you saw a lot of resilient performances to come back against Louisville down double digits and to come back and win that one by double digits. So, yes, it's really unfortunate they didn't, make that run to Tampa this weekend and that they aren't playing. But at the same time, I feel like you'll remember games like Louisville if you were there. You'll remember that last home game against Boston College when they were dropping the banner. Those are kind of those long-term memories that you just recall very vividly. You were there and how cool it was. So I think I do try to look at it from a half-glass full standpoint on the basketball season.
Well, and you know what? Sports in general make for great debate. And I think one of the things that hardcore basketball fans will have to debate for a long time now, for at least another year, is who exactly was the best basketball team in America. There were about a group of 6 to 8 teams that a lot of people felt like had a chance to win it, Florida State being one of those. So certainly add to the water cooler debate as we move forward. Of course, one of the things that has happened is they have canceled all the spring sports, which basketball was a winter sport. So they've canceled baseball, softball. We knew it was coming last week, but it was made official today. And one of the things they have done is basically extended a redshirt year to everyone that participates in the spring sport, be it a senior or a true freshman. Kind of what have you learned about that process, Bob, and what may be coming on down the line?
What I think we're still trying to ask as far as the question is just how many seniors will come back, because with the nature of spring sports, you're a couple months away from either embarking on a pro career or you've got a job or an internship lined up where you want to start, days after graduation at the end of April or early May. So I think a big question for a lot of these seniors, they do have the chance to come back in 2021. And it's really nice the NCAA moved quickly on that to let guys and girls know that that's an option. But on the other hand, I do question how many will take that opportunity to come back. I think in the end, there's a lot of moving pieces that the NCAA and schools have to figure out. You have to allocate a certain amount of scholarship dollars for seniors who are coming back. Those might extend your roster size in spring sports. And in baseball, you have a scholarship limit of 11.7. That's very difficult to work with under normal circumstances for baseball coaches, let alone something as complex as what we're going through now. And what we've talked to, some of the baseball coaches are going to be submitting proposals to the American Baseball Coaches Association, where then the group will formulate a proposal to athletic directors. What's realistic? What would they like to see? Can you go beyond 11.7 scholarships in baseball, for example? Is that financially feasible? So I think there's a lot of moving pieces. I think I have to applaud the coaches and these associations because they're all having good discussions and they're trying to take what they're hearing from players and assistant coaches and really formulate a best plan moving forward and to try and make this as good as you can for a student athlete moving forward.
Yeah, and there's some big questions involved in this. When you mentioned the money factor, plus you have to factor in Title IX. People will still have to be compliant with Title IX, or there will have to be an exception to Title IX before this can be actually put forward. So it is complex without doubt.
If I could weigh in here, yeah, this is a question that I talked with Jim Curry from FSU about, and they're studying it, as to what the NCAA, everything has tentacles. We all know the rule of unintended consequences, and so they're studying that. And our listeners should tune back in the coming podcasts we have as that onion gets peeled back. But I think the intention's great. And I think one of the things, like Bob said, we talked about was not all your student athletes are going to come back. A lot of them, they've already finished their undergraduate degrees and have internships and are off into life. So it'll be a really good rule for some. But some of the things you don't think about is like normal progress rule. How does it affect that? Yep. And there are so many issues, and by normal progress rule for our listeners, that's, student athletes have to take so many semesters of credit each year to be eligible for the following year. And so it could have, they have to think that one through. There's a number of things. Now, one thing I do like that I think makes it very feasible, Bob was making the point that there's 11.7 scholarships, and not every school is fully funded on their scholarships. FSU is fully funded in all sports, but even schools within the conference may only be budgeting 9 scholarships in baseball. So it gives the athletic director flexibility. This rule doesn't necessarily put them behind the 8 ball with budget. You can still, let a senior come back, but manage your budget within this ruling. So I'm sort of encouraged by that.
Yeah, and you're not the only person that has mentioned the academic side today. I've spoken with several college coaches from around the country, and one of their concerns moving forward is the academic development of their players. Now that in a lot of states, players were not allowed to be back on campus the rest of the year. They will have to do online classes from home, or if they're allowed in special circumstances to be in their dorm room if they're still in a dorm, but there will be no more in-person tutoring sessions. Those will have to be all done online or through video conference. And of course, that gets back into, there's the same question from college football coaches on player development. Will their players be able to develop physically, and how do you build your program? So yeah, there are a host of ripple effects off this thing. And of course, one of them, and I want to bring you in here, Charles Fishbein, is the limitations on recruiting. NCAA has mandated a dead period for college football programs until April 15th. Institutions are not allowed to instigate phone calls or video conference calls. They can send direct messages, text messages, emails to prospects. And then, of course, once April 15th gets here, they right now will be allowed 1 phone call per prospect through May 30th. Kind of what have you heard from college coaches and high school coaches about how the dead period is going to affect recruiting?
I mean, it all depends on what coaching staffs you speak to. The coaching staffs that just got on campus, whether it's the Florida States, the FAUs, the guys that are there for that just got there and are behind the 8 ball recruiting as it is, because you don't, when you first get there in the new job, you're behind recruiting. It's probably going to help them. They'll be able to catch up and kind of get more organized and start to plan out what's going to happen in the fall. One of the things that I heard from one of the coaches I spoke to is them possibly getting rid of the early signing day this year because of how the calendar is going to work, and go back to just having it in February. And just some of that's some of the talk that's gone around. I don't know if that's a legitimate thing that will happen, but it's something that the coach that I know that I spoke to yesterday definitely was interested in happening. So.
Yeah, I have not heard that, but that certainly would make sense with how this calendar may play out as we move forward, because obviously every kid in America and every program in America is going to be 2 months behind in recruiting if they can get back to recruiting by June 1st. Or, of course, the May period has not been necessarily canceled out yet, but I think we'd all be surprised if high schools were practicing in May. At least I would at this point. But, I know that you will probably see a lot of kids trying to FaceTime coaches or coaches making requests once a kid's contacted them to Facebook or FaceTime with them or video conference with them. A recruit can FaceTime with a coach if he instigates it. A coach at this point cannot FaceTime with a prospective student athlete, at least not instigate it, but he can receive a call that way. I think that one of the things I've talked to various coaches about is that they are going to spend more time than they normally would otherwise FaceTiming with high school coaches. Normally it's just a phone call. You don't FaceTime, but it's probably never been a more important thing to do, or more important time to do it than with the new staff like Coach Norvell and his staff. So I would think, I don't know this, but I would think that those guys would be FaceTiming with the high school coaches in their areas. I think that would certainly help build the one-on-one relationship, because obviously the more you sit down with someone in person, the better you know them. It's better than a phone call. So just to go back over the rules, there's a dead period that runs from today through April 15th. And the only thing a college football coach can do is instigate a direct message, send a text message, and by direct message I mean Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, a text message or an email. Phone calls are not allowed until April 15th. But a player can FaceTime or video conference with the coach as long as he makes the call to the coach or through the video conference, and then the college coaches can interact with the high school coaches, be it FaceTime or phone calls. So just in case, just want to clarify those rules, and then they can start making their calls to the prospects on April 15th through May 30th as the recruiting calendar still stands. But certainly college coaches and high school coaches, Bob, as you said, all have the same question. How do we develop our kids academically and athletically with the new reality that we're all dealing with? And then, like Jerry said, there's going to be no shortage of things to talk about and report on. It is a new world that we find ourselves in. And, Jerry, I know that we have plans to provide as much coverage as we can to our readers and our subscribers. And we don't think there's going to be any shortage of that, do we?
Yeah, that's what excites me. It's I guess it sounds strange to some people. I apologize if it does. I don't mean to be offensive. But every day that we get up, there's something different than we've ever had to cover, and there's no shortage of stories. I think how is the NCAA going to distribute basketball money to the conferences, or are they? Does the NCAA have insurance on March Madness? In the recruiting area, we look at the dead period. How is it different now than before? All these things are new. And as many years as I reported on them, this is new and different. It's not the same. There's nothing mundane. We're starting to see our world from a new perspective. And I think it's a paradigm shift. And I think it's going to be very interesting for our listeners over the coming weeks as this thing unfolds.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's going to be a wealth of information out there, and we're going to learn something new just about every day that unfolds. And Bob, what are some of the stories that you're looking forward to covering or chasing as we move forward?
I think I'm still very curious about, how things will be handled with the red shirt seniors coming back, for example. Name, image, and likeness is still, we thought that was going to be one of the biggest stories of 2020, and now it's definitely not the biggest, but it's up there. Governor Ron DeSantis, who's a former college baseball player at Yale, he looks, all but poised to sign a name, image, likeness bill into law in the coming days, weeks maybe. that is obviously a huge story as far as Florida will have a law, and potentially there are 20 other states debating laws. We have the potential for the lack of uniformity as far as what a student athlete on a state-by-state basis can do, can earn. It's going to be a very interesting storyline there. I'm curious, academics, I know we sometimes cringe at the term student athlete, but, Pat and Jerry, I think you guys both mentioned it too. How do academic departments around the country, how can they still help advise? How can they help with degree completion, whether somebody is in Tallahassee and learning just a few miles away, but it has to be done online? What about degree completion? How are they able to work with athletes? I think there's so many different, sports business type of stories that we're really interested in kind of looking into and asking some questions that we have and that readers have and providing some answers.
Yeah, and obviously we're hoping that we will, as Jerry said, be able to flatten this curve as quickly as possible. And one of my conversations yesterday, when it seemed like the world might turn back to normal, or what we've grown to know as normal by the end of May, that they were hoping that there might be some kind of June practice period that the NCAA might mandate for or allow college football programs to go through if they had not extinguished their 15 days of spring practice. Obviously, we don't have a timeline, but I would be interested to see if there's any stipulations that the NCAA does make if we can get back to whatever the new normal is by the beginning of the summer. So there's some questions like that I have. Obviously, guys, one of the things that we did get to see last Thursday was Florida State football in full pads for the first time under Coach Mike Norvell. And Jerry, just kind of want to get your thoughts that you took away from that practice. It was practice number 3, and we were hoping we were going to get to see 12 more.
Well, that was the first thing that came into my mind. I remember, we were all joking around about it on this podcast, the first one, about, well, we're going to get to watch practice and we're really excited, but who's going to screw this up for us so that, they cancel, they take away our privilege to watch practice. Lo and behold, little did we know that we'd only get to see 3 before something caused it to be canceled. Anyway, my takeaway is I'm glad we got to see it. I'm just thankful for the 3 we got to see, because what it did is it showed us what the potential is, and we can look at the glass being half empty, and all the practices we didn't get to see, and we can cry about that another day, but. Imagine if we hadn't gotten to see the 3 we saw. Man, it'd be a real.
Yeah. I'm like you. I'm taking some positives away from it. Number one, I loved what I saw from the coaching staff itself, and was really thought the energy of the kids was great. You're always going to have some kids that maybe don't buy in totally, and we might have seen some of that, but it was very few and far between. And I was just really impressed with the intensity and detail of the coaches and the energy surrounding the practice and the competitive nature of the kids. So I agree with you there. I took nothing away but positive. I was hoping that we might get to see a story like Wyatt Rector, who we wrote about last week, about his transition from quarterback and tight end. And there's some stories that we won't get to see unfold, but certainly more positives than negatives. Bob, what about you?
I think the biggest takeaway just for me is how much this coaching staff is consistent in its teaching methods. They all are on the same page. It's a group that, yes, we know a lot of them are from that Mike Norvell tree. Others aren't, but it seems like there's a great deal of cohesion there. I don't think you can fake it. I think we saw that it's real. It was only 3 practices. And I think whenever, sports are back, we'll see it again. I'm really excited about this staff and what they're bringing to the table. I think the players are too. Some of the quotes from the players were very incredible. I mean, not player speak, not rehearsed, kind of answers, but truly kids who feel like the coaches are there to help them improve as men and football players. And that's what I'm kind of looking forward to when sports get back, I want to see those coaches back out in the field with the players and continue to make that progress with this program.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Pat, I wanted to just add, there were a lot of positive things. I mean, one of our fears coming out of last year was secondary. And we saw in just the first 3 practices some great competition at that position, and with 2 guys still out of the practice.
Yes, yeah.
So I mean, that was really encouraging. And you and I sure enjoyed watching linebacker play. I mean, I think we got some linebackers for a change.
I can't wait to see that. I can't wait to see the back 7. I think they've got a chance to have a really good defense next year. But you're right, they have a chance to be loaded in the secondary. Hamza was not participating. Lars Woodby was limited, but certainly what you saw out of guys like Raymond, Carlos Becker, Travis J have to have you excited about that. And of course, Jaleel McRae, who I believe Bob was referencing as far as some of the things that he was talking about with the coaching staff, and then Steven Dix, and of course Amari Gaynor. I think the defense is going to be fun to watch as well. But yes.
So, Pat, when you mentioned those positions, all those names you just mentioned, what else do those guys do? They play special teams.
Yes, they do.
And so, you're talking about an improved defense, but the third segment on a football team is special teams, and we weren't as good as we could be there. So I think when you've got runners and hitters, which is what linebackers and defensive backs are, you have the potential to be improved in 2 out of your 3, just with the names we mentioned. So that's really encouraging.
And the other thing you saw on special teams, I was just going to say, the other thing you saw on special teams that all the coaches are engaged in special teams at the same intensity level as they are their position group drills. There's not a coach standing around during special teams drills. So whether it's individual drills or for a special teams unit or a team drill, there are 5 or 6 coaches involved in every special teams group. So I agree with you. It was fun to watch those guys go through those drills and with the same a level of attention and detail as they got from their position-specific groups.
Yeah, that it's really it's encouraging.
And, of course, we don't want to forget about the offense. They are responsible for putting the points on the board, and there's still some questions that remain on that side of the ball. Obviously, first and foremost, there's going to be a battle at quarterback between James Blackman, Tate Rodemaker, Travis Jordan, and, of course, Jordan Travis, and then Chubba Purdy when he gets here in June. And then, of course, the development of the offensive line. Deshaun Corbin had the tailback from Texas A&M had flashed a little bit. But, Bob, what are some of your thoughts on the offense and where they need to go and the questions that still need to be answered?
I think the kid who was the most impressive to us was Deshaun Corbin, the transfer from Texas A&M. I think he definitely looks the part as far as a number 1 running back. Now, how will he look in scrimmages and in live contact? That remains to be seen. But I think just as far as what he was able to do coming back from a knee injury, it was certainly impressive. I think at quarterback, James Blackman still looked like the clear, consistent number 1. I'm not saying there weren't good plays from Tate or from Jordan. It just wasn't there on a regular basis. And I think that's the position that you want some kind of consistency from, is the quarterback. I think there are some questions there. Offensive line was also a little bit difficult for me to evaluate just because it looked like players were in various spots. You didn't have Dante Lucas or Darius Washington this spring, and those are kind of 2 of the guys that you feel have some serious upside. So it would have been fun to see those guys in the mix and get some coaching from Alex Atkins. Just from purely watching Alex coach, really an entertaining guy, a guy who's very much involved, hands-on, blocking. It's not talking and yelling or cursing from the side. Very engaged. I think that's good to see. I don't want to say it's all positive, because it's not. He's willing to chew on a guy. But I think that kind of coaching style, I do think it will get through to the linemen. It's unfortunate that the offensive line in particular won't get those practices in the spring.
Agreed.
And I think that's one of the big unfortunate, just losses from spring, is you don't have that time to build chemistry and the five fingers on the glove that we all like to talk about with the offensive line. But it's part of the reality, and those guys will have to figure out how to work out on the side on their own and be ready for what looks like it could be August, with the startup of preseason camp.
Yeah, I think right now that's probably how you have to timeline it, is August would be the next time, unless, like we said, this thing gets resolved quicker rather than later. And then, of course, Jerry, I know that you had mentioned him a couple times, and that was true freshman Carter Boatwright at tight end. He stood out to us in shorts. And then again, he did a very good job in his first ever Oklahoma drill last Thursday, which is a one-on-one blocking drill. And Wyatt Rector also stood out, who's gone from quarterback to tight end. So although that position group is only 4 deep, they have certainly been impressive. Cameron McDonald's been impressive, as has Austin White. What were your general thoughts on what you saw from the tight ends in the first 3 days?
Yeah, I think the tight ends, exactly, they're athletes. They can run a little bit. I mean, real good probably for your typical tight end. And you can see how Norvell can flex them and create a receiver out of a Rector or a Boatwright, and yet put them in the backfield in that H-back position. So we saw both of those things happening out there, and that was encouraging. I wanted to say the most encouraging thing I saw was the unity between the head coach and the offensive coordinator. They eat out of the same bowl. I think I've said that before on the show. But, Mike Norvell's out there coaching. He's all over the field. And Dillingham is running that offense with absolute confidence, because the head coach knows that Dillingham and him think alike. And to me, that's critical. If you're ever going to build something, it's got to start there. And I was encouraged by that. Now, I agree that Corbin was the most impressive running back, and most encouraging. But there's some others there. You got Grant back, and 4 he's a heck of a hope that he's going to live up to his potential. And so I'm, we worried about the tailback position, but come camp, it could be that you have some real depth there. Grant's put on a bunch of weight, and but he still has fluid moves, and I like the chance at tailback, which I'm surprised to say.
Yeah, and Ja'Kai Douglas has been getting a lot of reps too. Ja'Kai Douglas, the freshman from Louisiana.
Yeah, and so that was encouraging from a personnel standpoint. And finally, you go into this. What we're going into is normally on June 1st, you go into the dog days of summer, and the players, after spring practice is over and they change semesters, they're on their own, right? And they have to do it on their own without coach supervision. Well, we're kind of in that right now. And for the offensive line to become the glove, the 5 fingers in the glove, you're going to have some leadership. And I saw a little bit of that. Pat, maybe you could comment on this, but, Bavion and the center position has shown some leadership, I think. And if some of those guys will go knocking on doors and get their teammates to come out there, it can't be coach organized. But if those guys will work together, study film together, talk do what they're allowed to do within the NCAA rules and the spirit of the law, they can get some things done, but it's going to require leadership. And I think there might be some. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that you've seen some leadership from Baselli and Bavion Johnson. You've mentioned those both of those guys, and they both showed leadership qualities last year on a team that struggled and on a unit that struggled. And of course, I think that their maturity, not only being a year older, but also I think the buy-in factor to what we've seen from them buying in the offensive line coach Alan Atkins and to Mike Norvell will all help enhance that and speed those processes up. And then, of course, Brady Scott's a year older and a guy that they've moved up and down the line, and you'll have you'll have some natural progression from those guys. Are all from the line as a whole, they're all year mature, both physically and mentally. So, then you'll have Dante Lucas, who won't be a true freshman next year, and who was one of the better offensive linemen who has missed some time this spring to practice. You would like to see him get in some work with these guys in what has now become a elongated off season. And of course, a lot of this is going to be predicated on whether these guys can actively go back on campus. There are some schools that are not going to allow their players on campus, in the facility, on the practice field. So some of this is going to have to be done away from the school. It's going to have to be done at parks when it's safe. And so there's some unanswered questions there as far as how they're going to be able to put these workouts together and these 7-on-7s workouts that the skill kids do together. So, yeah, certainly but I certainly think that the buy-in factor has been one of the reasons you've seen kind of leadership. We've noticed in practice that the kids will talk to each other between reps. This is what you did wrong. This is what you did right. I'm not sure we saw that last year in the limited time we had at practice. Not that it didn't happen, but I can remember several times when two kids would come off the field and discuss what happened in the 3 days that we just witnessed. So, yes, I believe that there's some leadership that's there. And as we've talked about before, the coaches create the culture, players carry out the culture. And as I said earlier in this podcast, not only is it across all campuses around the United States, in all sports, the culture of your team is going to be tested. Does the culture of your team exist outside the physical walls of your building? And, to be quite honest, did Coach Mike Norvell and his staff have enough time to build that independent culture when they're not there? It remains to be seen, but it's certainly a question that all college football programs, regardless of sport, are going to have to it's going to be answered over the coming months and weeks for sure.
I couldn't agree with you more about culture. The coaches always talk about that. It's your team. It's not ours. And, Mickey talked about that with us last week. At some point, the players have to take ownership. And to your point, has Norvell, as much progress as he's made, has he been here long enough for that to naturally occur?
Yeah. And, hopefully, like I said, hopefully they will be able to get this pandemic under control quicker rather than later, or sooner rather than later. And maybe there will be some way to address some of these developmental issues, both academically and athletically during the summer, which is typically been a time when coaches could not spend as much time with their kids. But hopefully nobody knows what the future holds today. So we will see what happens with not only FSU football, but with all the FSU sports. Well, guys, there's a lot of news coming our way, the way of our subscribers over the next several weeks and months. And, of course, appreciate you guys listening and subscribing to the Osceola. And we've got no shortage of news to report moving forward. One of the things that we're looking to bring on board and going through some beta testing now is our message boards. We will have a private message board for our members and a public message board, and we'll cover a variety of things, all FSU sports, no topic is off the board. We will also enhance our recruiting coverage over the next coming weeks. We will have a virtual recruiting board, and you will see more articles in relation relation to football recruiting specifically. We will be talking with high school coaches and reaching out to players that Florida State is recruiting and try to get their thoughts on the recruiting process and, of course, the changes that have taken place in the recruiting processes as well. But Jerry or Bob, do you have anything that you would like to add on the new Osceola features?
Well, with the message boards and the recruiting board, we're teasing it up here today, and it's been in some testing, and then we'll release it. Bob will, in his morning news email that goes out, will let you know when it's available, and it should be very, very soon, any day now. What I'd like to encourage we're going to need people to come on board and, post messages or questions and then give us feedback. I mean, you can do it right on the board if you wish, about things that you like, things that you'd like us to see us do more of, maybe some things that you have difficulty using. Let us know. Don't be afraid to let us know, because we want it to be the best that it can be.
Bob?
No, I agree with Jerry. I think the message board is a community. It's not necessarily just for us as a group to share our thoughts, but it's for you guys to ask questions and to kind of steer us toward coverage of certain sports, to ask questions, to get answers to almost any kind of question that you might have about FSU on the field or off the field. So we're kind of looking forward to this. This is a really good opportunity for us to interact with you as fans. And honestly, we want to get a lot of former players involved too. The Noles who built the programs, we'd like to invite them to comment and answer your questions too. So we're looking forward to continuing to build the community that we have.
Well, and the word community, the word community is so important and so powerful at this time when we're limited in how much sports we can get. This gives us a coffee shop, if you will, to come to chat and talk about, our sports. And I think that's a comfort, and it's fun. And I think the word community is really critical to what we want this to be.
Yeah, I agree, and we appreciate all of you guys being a part of our community, and of course, we'll be thinking about you and your communities over the coming days and weeks. And Jerry, Bob, and Fish, I appreciate it as always. We will be back next week, either as a group or individually at some point with another Osceola podcast. We hope all of you guys stay safe and look forward to speaking with you again next week. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Take care.
Have a great day. Bye.
Hope you enjoyed this edition of the Osceola Podcast. Stay tuned for the next edition, coming soon at theosceola.com.